The Burning Woods by Ella Garcia. CJ and her family were going on a camping trip. In the car, her brother Carlos complained, "I wish I stayed and attended my friend's pool party tomorrow." While her brother complained, CJ was excited about the outdoor activities. She was looking at the towering trees until her dad suddenly stepped on the brakes. Her long blonde hair covered her face. In front of the car was an upside-down truck. Nobody was inside, but blood was everywhere. John, CJ, and Carlos' dad got out of the car. His brown boots walked on the broken glass while making his way around the black truck. A trail of blood led into the woods. John pulled out his phone and tried calling the police. It rang for a while, but no one answered. Suddenly, flocks of birds started to fly away from the trees. Animals like rabbits, foxes, badgers started to run out of the woods. CJ honked the horn and shouted, "Let's go!" John ran back to the car and drove around the truck. Then, a deer crossed the road. John quickly turned, accidentally making the car go off the road and crash into the trees, smashing the front of the car, and a branch shattered the window. None of them was badly injured. They had no ride back, and it was getting dark. No cars have passed by, so they made their tents and slept. After a few hours, Carlos was woken up by a stomping noise outside. He turned on his flashlight and went out. He flashed the light at the trees and entered the woods. Through the darkness, Carlos caught a glimpse of a shadow figure, but after a blink, it was gone. He heard something was running towards him, but before he could turn his neck, something tackled him. When the sun started to shine on their tent, John noticed that Carlos was gone. John called to CJ and yelled, "Wake up, CJ! Where's your brother? I heard him gone out of the tent last night." CJ spoke, barely opening her eyes. John got out of the tent and looked around for Carlos. When he entered the forest, he found a flashlight. John went deeper into the forest until CJ was confronted by a man that had half his skin burnt and had his body coated in dirt. The man grasped CJ's shoulder and shouted, "Help me! They're coming for all of us!" When John got back to CJ, the man collapsed to the ground. "What happened?" John asked. CJ answered, "He said they're coming for us, but who's they?" CJ felt his pulse and he was still breathing. "What are we going to do with him?" CJ questioned her dad in a panicked voice. John responded, "We have to find your brother first and come back for him after." John packed food, water, and his lucky knife in a backpack and quickly headed into the woods with CJ. Inside a deep hole in the ground, Carlos was unconscious. When he woke up, he had an awful headache. Carlos felt the back of his head and his blonde hair covered with blood. "Help! Help!" Carlos screamed. CJ and her dad were nowhere close to Carlos until something decided to make an appearance. The trees, tall as skyscrapers, started to shake one by one from every footstep the creature made. They both fled from it. CJ and her dad ran across the wet blanket of leaves. They ran full pelt, trying to outrun the creature, but CJ felt the ground underneath her boots give way. A small gasp left her lips as her arms flailed in the fading light, gravity taking her down into a trap. CJ yelled, "Dad, get me out of here!" John tried reaching her hand, but the hole was just too deep. He then found a long, thick branch for CJ to hold on to. When CJ was out, they both noticed other deep holes in the area. Carlos heard his father and sister's voice and called, "Dad, help me!" They followed his voice and found a hole covered with wood. They pushed the pile of wood and pulled Carlos out. John was relieved that Carlos was safe, but he was curious what the creature would do to him. CJ screamed. She was pointing to a burnt body in one of the holes. The smell of the burnt body was quite sickening. When they started to run back to the road, the ground started to tremble from the creature's footsteps. It was the first time they have seen the creature. It wasn't a normal human. Its body was heavily built with green glowing eyes, and its clothing was worn out. John started to run until CJ noticed Carlos' blue eyes were locked on like magnets to the beast. CJ started to pull Carlos to escape from the beast, who wasn't far behind. Carlos began to come back to the real world, and both caught up with their dad. They ran in a zigzag pattern to dodge the thick trees and exit the woods. When they reached the road, cars were passing by. They all waved their arms to get a ride, but after a few seconds the beast has reached them. He roared an ear-splitting sound, and the vehicle stopped immediately. John ran towards the beast and grabbed the knife from his backpack. The beast ran towards him and punched him in the stomach, but John wasn't finished. He ran towards the beast again and dodged all the hits, then quickly stabbed its heart. The beast started to turn into ashes, and the strong wind blew it away. Carlos and CJ were relieved it was all over. John walked up to the vehicle and begged, "Hey, we have been stuck in this area since yesterday. Can you please give us a ride?" The man replied, "Yes, of course, get in." They stopped by their tent to check on the man from earlier, but he was gone. They knew the beast must have taken the man. CJ whispered, "Carlos, I don't think it's only one of its kind." Carlos replied, "Let it go, CJ. We're just lucky we got out alive." All of them were off and returned to their normal lives.